So you can press on that. Is it working? Yes. I think it is. Yeah. You can start. Good morning, dear participants. At the outset, I would like to thank you, Madam Special Rapporteur, for all your commitments in advancing the rights and protection of women and girls, and for your last report that we highly appreciated. I would like to assure you of Algeria's strong support and commitment to help you and support your mandate. I would also like to thank the panelists who are participating to this side event. And I'm sure and confident that their expertise and insight will help contributing to a forward-looking discussion today. While I was preparing my opening remarks, I asked my mother for her like to give me her impression or what first comes to her mind when we speak about motherhood. And she said something very interesting and impactful that I try to translate this way. She said, motherhood is often celebrated in principle, but yet not sufficiently supported in practice. And I found that this summarizes everything. So mothers continue to face tremendous gaps all across the world, not only because of the institutional gap, but also because of negative stereotypes, we should admit it, because of the lack of social protection. And we do believe from the Algerian perspective that this is not a social issue merely. It is a human rights issue because these challenges manifest themselves through inadequate maternity protection, insufficient childcare services, workplace discrimination, economic insecurity for a lot of mothers across the world, and in the worst cases, violence and discrimination. So today I speak before you not only as an Algerian state representative or a diplomat, but also as a mother who was born and grown up in a context affected by divorce. So I was raised by my mother, who is proudly sitting here, by my mother, yes, who does not understand a lot of English, but it's fine. It's fine. So who was raised in, as I said, in a context of divorce, and where my mother used to bear the responsibility, the caregiving responsibility, but also the financial responsibility. And I do believe that today, as a mother and a working woman, I have experienced many facets of motherhood. So born with and raised by a single woman, and myself a working mother with all the challenges that we face. But this unique experience has given me also the possibility to witness all the efforts that my country has made, and that I consider to be a positive result of this effort, because access to education, to healthcare, to protection made me be what I am today. Like if my mother lacked of protection as a single mother or as a divorced mother or me as a working woman, I would have never been what I am today. So I would like to highlight maybe three measures or three, best practices, if we can call them, that I myself consider as very good practices that my country has to share at the international or regional level. The first one is our legislative system and protection of mothers through combating violence against mothers and women in general. The second one is the women empowerment, especially, and economic empowerment. The third one is also the post-divorce protection, because this talks to me a lot. So the first one, in combating violence against women, I can proudly say that we are among the few countries in our region that recognize domestic violence as such. So in our laws, for example, violence against daughter or violence against wives or violence against sisters are recognized and heavily penalized in our penal code. We recognize also another type of violence, which is quite interesting, which is violence that occur from formal husband. So this is, we think that when the marriage ends, unfortunately, the husband, the woman has got this guarantee that her former husband cannot approach her or be violent with her, either psychologically or physically. So we think that this is very important to safeguard and protect mothers from this aspect. Also, together with this strong legal system, we have shelters that help mothers, that welcome mothers. Special rapporteur, don't put pressure on me, please. we have many social measures that protect women and make her feel safe. The second thing, which is extremely important, is women empowerment. So in my country, women, for example, mothers, to speak about mothers, receive full paid maternity leaves of more than 14 weeks. They have also nursing hours. So this is to promote breastfeeding and child-mother bonds. And this can take like two years. There is also, there is no way that the employee, no way to dismissal during pregnancy, but also during maternity leave. There is also this possibility in my country for working mothers to be taken into charge in private hospitals or public hospitals freely, everywhere, wherever they want. There is also many things I can speak about, but I'm under pressure. So there is also in women empowerment, and I owe this to my director who told me about this. For women who decide to dedicate their life to their family, they are not recognized as stay-at-home mothers. So the government gives loans to promote small enterprises, domestic activities that can help them avoid any economic vulnerability or social exclusion, because we have this idea that women who stay at home don't do nothing and they receive from their husband, etc. So to avoid this, they are encouraged to have activities. The other, I will wrap up. Yes. The third one is the post-divorce protection that is extremely important for us. So mothers don't feel trapped in any divorce, in any marriage situation or family situation that gets toxic, and which obliges the husband to take to provide a house for the mothers and the kids, and which I believe is a very important measure to protect the family, the dignity of mothers that have custody, and the children also. So with this, I don't want to say that in my country everything is perfect. We are aware that there are challenges also, and maybe challenges that lies on narratives, combating narratives, promoting narratives that upgrade the role of mothers. And we think that it's through these side events and commitment that we can raise awareness on this. And now I give the floor to the special rapporteur with all my apologies.
I very much appreciate your enthusiasm and passion, both as a mother and a daughter of a mother, and also sharing, yeah, and also sharing best practices from your country. Well, first of all, I want to welcome everybody and thank in particularly the co-sponsors of this event, the Permanent Mission of Algeria, Malaysia, Egypt, and the Gambia, as well as Make Mothers Matter, the European Network of Migrant Women, the CSW NGO Committee on the Family in Geneva, for co-sponsoring this event. You've heard from me earlier this week about violence against mothers, which is the report I presented, in which really I tried to stress the importance of recognizing mothers as a distinct category of rights holders that have specific needs requiring tailored protections. And if you recall, in the report, I also spoke about the groups of mothers that are particularly at risk of violence and discrimination. So today's side event, I want to speak actually less, and we hear from representatives of some of these groups. Some of the women who are with us here today or online have lived experiences, and others have worked with these women through their organizations or as individuals. So I'm very happy to therefore move to our first speaker, Mrs. Valerie Bischelmeyer, who is a board member and vice president of Make Mothers Matter, which is an international NGO dedicated to ensuring that mothers are recognized, supported, and empowered as key drivers of social, economic, and peaceful development. And she herself is also a mother of 3 children. So, Mrs. Bischelmeyer, first of all, thank you for being with us and for also supporting this event. I wanted to ask you, drawing on your experience, how do employment and social security policies contribute to the challenges faced by mothers, and what examples of good practice should states consider? You have 7 minutes.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Mrs. Special Rapporteur, and your team for the organization of this important side event, and for inviting me to contribute. And as the representative of MMM, Make Mothers Matter, which is a feminist, non-political and non-religious international NGO working globally to advance the rights of women who are mothers, I also want to express our gratitude to you for dedicating a full report to a topic which is really rarely discussed at the Human Rights Council and in other forums. But challenges faced by mothers in the labor market and beyond are not simply the result of individual choices. They are shaped by employment and social protection system that reflect broader cultural norms and expectations about women's roles in society. While maternity protection mostly addresses the biological dimensions of motherhood, its wider social and economic consequences receive far less attention. Motherhood is one of the many roles women play in society, an essential, valuable, rewarding role, yet it too often creates barriers to their full economic, political, and social participation. Mothers do experience specific and intersecting forms of discrimination linked to their status of parents, on top of discrimination based on gender and other characteristics. Even before becoming mothers, women of childbearing age are often viewed as potential mothers and treated accordingly. Motherhood also carries significant costs in terms of lost earnings, career stagnation, financial dependence, long-term economic insecurity, poor health and well-being, and as the report makes clear, increased vulnerability to violence. It's fair to say that this motherhood penalty remains one of the major drivers of gender inequality worldwide. Yet it is still insufficiently measured. We have absolutely no data on mothers, largely invisible in public policy and inadequately addressed. The evidence is compelling, though. Despite anti-discrimination laws, pregnancy and maternity discrimination remain widespread. In the United States, for example, 1 in 5 pregnant women report experiencing discrimination at work. According to the ILO, only 36% of new mothers worldwide receive maternity cash benefits, because social protection is usually tied to formal employment and excludes women in informal work or self-employed, which is a choice forced upon many mothers who are seeking flexibility. Women perform 76% of unpaid care and domestic work globally, and an estimated 708 million women are outside the labor force because of unpaid care responsibilities, with a lack of affordable childcare being a major factor. Recent research from the London School of Economics shows that women's earnings decline sharply after the birth of a first child, by around 40% in the UK. For example, in high-income countries, the motherhood accounts for up to 80% of the gender pay gap, reflecting career interruptions and forced part-time, as well as persistent stereotypes about mothers' commitment and availability. Those earning losses, of course, accumulate over a lifetime, resulting in significant pension gaps. In the EU, for example, the average gender pension gap stands at 25% in spite of widespread care credits policies. And it typically increases, of course, with the number of children. Finally, a recent survey conducted by MMM across Europe half of mothers reported experiencing mental health challenges, which are totally overlooked. We know many other policies that can help, at least partially, address these issues. They include anti-discriminatory laws, universal maternity protection, affordable childcare, pension credits for caregiving, well-paid maternity, paternity, and parental leaves, as well as flexible working arrangements. These measures are necessary and important, yet they do not fully address the lack of recognition, support, and redistribution of mothers' unpaid care work. Too often, there remain adjustments to systems and workplaces that were simply not designed with caregivers in mind. Indeed, policies alone are not enough. We also need a broader cultural shift where men are encouraged and enabled to share caregiving responsibilities equally. And the private sector also has a crucial role to play. Employers can create genuinely family-friendly workplaces by supporting all caregivers, including men, and recognizing the skills developed through caregiving and offering quality, flexible, and part-time work options, including job sharing, without penalizing career progression. Beyond this, more systemic changes are needed. Countries in Latin America and Caribbean are showing promising examples by recognizing care as a right and promoting a care society, and developing innovative care systems at national and local levels. Bogota's care block are such an example. Let me conclude by reiterating a point I made during the interactive dialogue. When we fail to even name mothers, we render their experiences invisible, and the discrimination, human rights violation, and structural barriers they face remain insufficiently addressed. Recognizing mothers is not about reducing mother to a single role. It's about ensuring that the realities of motherhood are reflected in the laws, policies, and institutions that advance substantive gender equality. So let's continue the discussion initiated by the Special Rapporteur and place motherhood at the heart of gender equality debates. Only then we can build employment and social protection systems that truly work for mothers. Thank you, and apologies for being a bit.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Bischelmeier, for again emphasizing the point on the importance of recognizing mothers, but also speaking to the motherhood penalty and the social and economic protection measures that are needed to better support and appreciate mothers. With that, we'll move to Mrs. Janaina. I hope I said that correct. Yes, Albuquerque. From Filia. She's an international family lawyer, a member of Filia Hague and legal coordinator of Revibra Europe. For those who don't know Filia Hague Mothers, it's a global advocacy initiative working to reform the application of the Hague Abduction Convention to better protect mothers and children fleeing domestic abuse. And Revibra Europe is a non-profit organization that provides legal and psychological support to Brazilian migrant women in Europe who are victims of domestic and gender-based violence. So, Mrs. Albuquerque, as a legal expert, could you please explain how custody disputes and family court proceedings might contribute to patterns of violence against mothers, and what legal and policy reforms should states consider to better safeguard the rights of mothers and their children? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this panel. So my intervention will address how cross-border international disputes, family disputes, may unravel, and how the 1980 Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction is being weaponized against survivors of gender-based violence and their children. So this treaty was envisioned as a prompt mechanism to return children taken from their place of habitual residence and from the care of the parent without consent. Yet it rests on a presumption that every international move of a child is inherently harmful. A presumption ignores the move of a child when the requesting state is not a safe environment for mothers and children, and also a presumption that ignores cases where the decision to take the child across a border is actually a protective act taken to escape situations of domestic violence. Most taking parents are mothers, and a high proportion report that they fled for safety. What they encounter is a process stacked against them. They are stigmatized as abductors, and because the convention is built around returning children promptly, cases are expedited and courts are pressed to decide quickly. Judges rush to trial with insufficient time to gather evidence, to conduct meaningful fact-finding and risk assessment, and to hear the voice of the child. The Convention foresees no domestic violence defense, and survivors typically rely on Article 13(1)(b), which allows a court to refuse return where there's a grave risk that the child will be exposed to physical or psychological harm or otherwise placed in an intolerable situation. In practice, the exception is interpreted narrowly, and the burden of proof is high, making it extremely difficult to reach the threshold to satisfy a court. Training is not consistently ensured, and gender, migration status, race, and class are often disregarded. Survivor mothers face judges who do not grasp the dynamics of domestic violence and its harm to children. They minimize coercive control and reproduce gender biases. Return can be ordered even when a grave risk is established, and courts may rely on so-called protective measures intended to reduce the risk to provide, in theory, a safe return. Yet practitioners, advocates, and survivors, they have consistently warned that these measures rarely work in practice and are seldom enforceable. They ultimately reinsert mothers and children into the cycles of abuse and expose them to further and escalating danger. The Convention provides for the return of the child, but not the return of the taking parents. And in practice, survivor mothers are criminalized for the abduction, their immigration status is put at risk, and they often lose custody and access to their children. I will read now some quotes that describe their experience. "I haven't seen my son in 4 years. The father alienated my son from me. A private investigator follows me wherever I go. He's trying to get me in prison. My daughter feels like she's being punished for nothing, and I feel like abuse will never end. Since the return, my children are allowed to see me for 2 hours twice a month under strict supervision. I'm not allowed to take them outside, nor even for an ice cream. I'm not even allowed to speak to them in our native language. Despite documented evidence of abuse, despite the statements from women's shelters, despite texts, despite confirmation from a previous girlfriend of the father's abuse, despite everything, the court chose to strip me of custody and guardianship as punishment and as a message. The judge didn't listen to me about being bashed and raped by my husband. They didn't care. They said that the law was only interested in my daughter. She had seen me being hit and bleeding and crying, but they didn't care about that either. I had recently had to return to my children's habitual residence. We were all struggling very much at the moment. It has been extremely difficult both mentally and physically. I feel betrayed by my country, and I'm running out of ways to protect myself here. I have been buried in court proceedings and terrorized over the phone, labeled a criminal for wanting to end the abuse and provide a peaceful environment for my kids. When I appealed the decision, I had to stand completely alone, self-represented against 3 judges, while my ex stood there with full legal team, solicitor, barrister, legal secretary, and interpreter. That was the moment I realized that there is no justice. There is no equality before the law, not for women like me. I lived in a country where I had no friends and no family, without work and unable to speak the language. I was traumatized by the court system, the unjust laws. Every single government sector I went to pleading for help failed to assist me, and I left to save my life. So litigation is a continuation of coercive control, and it is done through filing repeated applications, appealing every adverse decision, excessive disclosure requests, using hearings as opportunities for intimidation, prolonging proceedings to increase emotional and financial exhaustion. Also, and the Hague proceedings are not necessarily to discuss custody. It's not. The point is basically to return the children so that custody can then be discussed in the right jurisdiction. But mandatory co-parenting and the presumption of shared and contact and custody, it often works against the mothers in situation, and it's used to continue monitoring the mother's activities, to dictate her daily decisions, to create constant conflict, to undermine the mother's authority, and also to use contact arrangements as opportunity for continued abuse through intimidation, threats, harassment, monitoring, and manipulation. There's also so much institutional belief and credibility attacks on mothers in the court systems. If they allege abuse, they are often accused of being unable to co-parent, of being overprotective, of being vindictive, and to be hostile towards the father, many times being called a parental alienator. The children become instruments of coercive control themselves, and the burden of proof is very difficult. Abusive behaviors are usually cumulative. They individually may look minor, but collectively they are highly controlling. They are oftentimes psychological, and it's hard to document. So it's not actually able, they are not able to present the evidence to the court. So 4 recommendations: where abuse is alleged, courts must conduct a genuine fact-finding and risk assessment before deciding custody or return. They must hear the child rather than rushing to an outcome, especially in the context of Hague proceedings. Acknowledgement that violence against the mother is inherently harmful to the child is a conception that courts should adopt as quickly as possible. Trainings for authorities to actually understand coercive control, post-separation abuse, and trauma, so they can understand the victim's perspective properly when they argue what they went through. Access to legal aid, cost protection, and also limits on repeat and vexatious applications by the aggressor. And for Hague proceedings in particular, its implementation must be compatible with human rights obligations. There must be an acknowledgement that removal is not wrongful in domestic violence cases, and there is a rebutable presumption of non-return, that there is accessible, affordable, and swift relocation proceedings so that migrant mothers are not stuck in a foreign country without any kind of support and in a situation of multiple vulnerabilities, and that there is information about the convention made available at visa application points and embassies so that they are aware of what's happening, because oftentimes they don't know what they are dealing with. And to conclude, I would say that the human rights framework protecting women and children has significantly developed since the convention entered into force, and contracting states should prioritize the safety of survivors and children over international comity. Private international law cannot operate in isolation from human rights obligations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I take also this opportunity to say that the mandate has engaged on the gender bias in child custody proceedings in family courts. There's a whole thematic report on this. And we have also engaged with the Hague Abduction Convention Secretariat and member states of the convention on all these issues that she spoke to. So if anyone's interested, also we can make that available. We'll move now also to our third speaker. I have the pleasure also to welcome Ms. Anna Zubnina, who is the Executive Director of the European Network of Migrant Women. The European Network of Migrant Women is a Europe-wide migrant women-led organization that advocates for the right of migrants, refugee and ethnic minority women and girls, and works to combat discrimination and violence and promote equality and justice and women's leadership. So Anna, in light of your work and experience, where do you see the most significant gaps, and what reforms in your view are needed to ensure that the rights of refugee and migrant mothers, who are also quite exposed to violence as mothers, are adequately safeguarded?
Thank you so much, Reem, for organizing this event. I cannot express enough how grateful we are for being here and for the report itself, which is not a matter of pride, I believe, for the United Nations, that it is the first report on mothers, as far as I know, the comprehensive one. For our network, the issue of migrant mothers is fundamental, it's central, because a lot of our constituents are mothers. This is the reality of migrant and refugee women. But I'd like to start by saying that when we discuss in general violence against migrant and refugee mothers, we must recognize a broader reality. And this reality is such that mothers are completely invisible in current European policymaking. This is our area of work. We work primarily with European and EU institutions, and this is a fact. Another broader reality is that it is an uncomfortable truth, I believe, for many states to recognize it, but migrant mothers are seen as reproductive material to fill in demographic deficit in Europe. So I want to have it at the backdrop. And while European Union prohibits sex discrimination, including discrimination related to pregnancy and maternity, there are virtually no policy initiatives right now addressing the rights, reality of violence and discrimination against mothers in general, including discrimination and violence perpetuated against them by state and non-state actors. And so, as such, the principle recognized in CEDAW that maternity requires specific protection as both biological reality and social function has disappeared from the EU political agenda. Now, migrant and refugee women are mothers, many of them, and the consequences of this political neglect is particularly severe for this group. Of course, migrant mothers are not a homogeneous group, and among many differences, legal status plays an important role in determining access to rights, protection, and remedies. For example, for mothers arriving to Europe through family unification, residence rights are often dependent on a spouse or a partner. This legal dependency increases vulnerability to domestic violence and prevents women from leaving abusive men. For undocumented mothers, this situation is much more severe. In some European countries, maternity care is not recognized as basic or emergency health care. That means these women do not have access to hospitals when they give birth, or if there are some complications in their pregnancy. And of course, after childbirth, access to social protection, if you're undocumented, is non-existent. Many migrant mothers are separated from their children because they are denied family reunification, and they are prevented from bringing their children to the country where they reside currently. Others, they leave the children in the country of origin and become sole providers. Domestic workers are a clear example here. Europe depends on the labor of domestic workers while keeping these women separated from their children. In Spain, domestic workers successfully challenged their exclusion from unemployment protection before the EU Court of Justice, and the court held that the exclusion constituted indirect sex discrimination because overwhelming majority of domestic workers are women. Many migrant mothers also flee, and they flee not only to protect themselves, but to protect their children. This is a very strong motivation for women to seek asylum, including asylum for their daughters, to protect them from forced marriage, female genital mutilation, sexual exploitation. Some of them are widows, and they're persecuted for the perceived relationship or acts by the fathers of their children. Yet asylum system does not recognize motherhood as a distinct dimension of persecution. And then there is a so-called migration journey, which is not really any journey. It exposes mothers to sexual exploitation, violence, and trafficking. While when they arrive, they are placed in insecure accommodation, very often mixed-sex facilities, and further at risk of exploitation. I will not even go into the details about the courts that was covered very comprehensively. This is the cases that we're dealing with also on a daily basis. I just want to mention that European Union Migration Pact just came into force, and normally I would call right now for protecting measures inside the Migration Pact, but this demand would be meaningless at the time when right now the European Commission is hosting the Taliban in Europe, negotiating with them the deportation of Afghans. One last mention that we have a very peculiar situation with regards to sexual reproductive health. So, for example, in Malta, if a woman is undocumented and she has dependent legal status, or she has dependent legal status, and she's a mother of 3, and she would like to terminate her 4th pregnancy, she can't. Because Malta, knowing very well what a woman is, bans abortion on all grounds, and so the woman cannot leave the country. But when the child is born, there is also a possibility to erase mother from birth certificate because there is parent 1 and parent 2. So women are expected to bear children, raise children, to be incubators, especially through surrogacy, and yet they are at the same time erased from law, policy, and even language. And I'd like to finish by saying that I was asked to identify gaps, and there are many gaps, but one gap underlines them all, and it's called patriarchy, which means the rule of fathers. And we still exist in this reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was very powerful. Now I would like to introduce to you Mrs. Sadia Ahmed Abu Oude, a mother from Gaza, who's connecting with us online. And we would like to thank also Al-Haq organization in Palestine for connecting us to her. She's a mother from Gaza, and her husband and 7 children were killed when an Israeli missile struck their home while she was at a nearby market. So rather than attempting to summarize her heartbreaking story, she will tell it herself. if we can connect her. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Saida Ahmed Abouda from Gaza, 42 years old. I am an English teacher with UNRWA. I was a mother for 7 children, 2 sons and 5 daughters. The oldest one was 20 years and the youngest was only 3 years. Their names were Yusuf, Ruqayya, Maysoon, Rana, Mayar, Sara, and Iyas. I lost them all in a barbarian, unfair Israeli airstrike in Gaza on an UNRWA shelter school in El Shati. That was at the 7th of November 2024. At that day, I went to the market to buy some necessary things for them because we were displaced from place to place. And when I was at the market, I heard a loud explosion. I asked about this, and I have been told that it is in the place where my family were. I started running, asking for a car to carry me to the school. And when I was there, I was surprised to see a fire engine and an ambulance. And when I entered the school, I looked at the classrooms. Everything was destroyed, burned, and nobody were there. I started screaming, and the press journalists were there covering the crime, took me to the Al-Shifa hospital. And there they asked me to identify my children's dead body. It wasn't a moment of recognition, and it was a moment that my whole world was collapsed in front of my eyes. Imagine that mother have been asked to look at her dead body's children to find them and to know who is this. And in fact, I was a lucky mother because many mothers in Gaza couldn't bury their children until now. At that time, I was shocked and just thinking of something to make sense, but nothing happened. I lost everything. I left the hospital with no answers, and everything in my life was in my stability, my family, my safety, everything. I went back with my husband's family to another shelter where they were sharing half a classroom, and we were 9 people. And I didn't leave this classroom, and I didn't see the sun for 4 months. I wasn't able to talk, and I fell in a trauma. And I spent all time reciting Quran all the time because it was my medicine. I couldn't see my mom because I was in the north and she was in the south. And as you know, Israelis was separating Gaza Strip, and no one have been allowed to come from south to north or vice versa. So my mom just was calling me and crying all the time. My mother-in-law also was in my same situation because she lost her son and her grandson, who are my family. And she was crying and screaming all the time. She couldn't endure the loss, and another son of hers was detained by the IOF since October 2024 until now. She was 70 years old and she lives in the shelter with us, and the shelter was miserable life, lack of water, lack of food, lack of safety, and the fear was everywhere, and the bombardment was ongoing. Mothers in Gaza suffered a lot during the war because there wasn't anything to cook or anything to feed our children. Starvation was very hard for 2 months in the north, and another starvation started in the south in 2025. Imagine that you couldn't feed your children and you just start to tell them stories until they fell asleep because you didn't have anything to give them. I remember my children asking for a quarter of loaf of bread, and we were going out to pick herbs to eat. I spent 4 months after the crime with my husband's family. When the ceasefire started, I tried to go to the south to see my mom. I walked for 7 kilometers from the north to the south to meet my mom. And there, I found my family who were living in a tent in Deir el-Balah. I lived with them for 4 months until another crime happened. Israel's air forces dropped many missiles and rockets on tents on displaced people in Deir el-Balah. And one of these tents was for my brother family. And another big loss. My brother's wife and 4 of his 7 children were killed. 3 children survived with severe injuries, and now they are with me in Jordan to get a treatment. My niece, 10 years old, lost both her legs, and her sister, 15 years old, lost her eye completely, and her brother lost the ability to move his arm. After this crime, my mom didn't endure this big loss, and she was completely torn apart, and she lost her life. She had a stroke. I miss my mom also. I miss everything. I miss, because of this genocide, I miss every single moment of my day life. And I miss the word mom. Nobody call me mom. I miss their shouting, my children's voice, their faces. I lost my entire life. My days now are just an ongoing pain. I believe that my faith keeps me going because there is a day of justice. And all of us, we are meet in the day after, inshallah, in paradise. And we all will meet together. I want to send a message to the world. The silence of the world is a complicity of the genocide that happened in Gaza. The world must act, not still watch, because we are not numbers and we are not news or headlines. We are not asking for sympathy. We just ask for justice, humanity, and protection that every human being deserves. The world must work to stop this bleeding of life. Enough families have been killed and enough families have been broken, and this genocide must stop. And each person in Gaza has a right to demand for justice and ask for punishment for those criminals who kill our children every day.
Yeah, for sharing your story despite the pain, and may God give you strength through these very difficult times. And we now come to our last speaker, who couldn't unfortunately join us live, but she sent a video message. We will hear from Mrs. Alicia Gomez, the representative of the organization La Colmena, a survivor of prostitution in Colombia, where she was exploited over 15 years. She also is a mother of 2 daughters and has 2 granddaughters.
Mi nombre es Alicia Gómez Quintero, colombiana, madre de 2 hijas. Voy a contar una parte de mi vida. Cuando yo tenía 9 años, mi madre me entrega a una familia para hacer trabajos domésticos, donde le prometieron que me darían estudio y comida, el cual nunca se cumplió. Solo notaba que mi madre cada mes iba y se acercaba a la puerta de esa casa y se hablaba con la supuestamente patrona mía y no se saludaba, no me saludaba ni nada, sino se iba. Lógico, yo quedaba muy triste. Al pasar los años me voy regreso a la casa de mi madre. Mi madre me decía, vaya donde Jorge que nos dé para la comida. El Señor me subía a la cama, me manoseaba mi cuerpo. Mi madre era consciente, pero yo esto lo hice normal. Pues yo me voy de mi casa a los 13 años y vaya, me encuentro una amiga que supuestamente me lleva a trabajar empacadora. Sorpresa que era un bar. Allí inicia mi nueva tortura. Allí inicia la prostitución. Allí inicia donde empiezo a consumir drogas, marihuana, bazuco, entre otras, licor. Esto lo hacía más como porque me salí de un infierno para entrar a otro infierno. Al pasar los años, quedo embarazada de una de mis dos hijas, de la mayor. Resulta de que pensé que iba a coger el cielo a dos manos y me iba con el hombre de mis sueños. Pues no, este me daba unas muendas en el embarazo de mi hija mayor. No me daba casi comida. Al pasar el tiempo, vuelvo y caigo en la mano de la prostitución. Pero ya esto fue más fuerte porque ya llegué al fondo, al tanto de casi perder a mis dos hijas. Casi las pierdo. Hoy en día creo que se está repitiendo la misma historia con mi hija mayor. Y desafortunadamente se está repitiendo la historia con mi nieta. Mi hija en este momento sufro porque es alcohólica, se le ha dado muchas oportunidades, pero ya no lo ha sabido aprovechar. No es que lo haya sabido aprovechar, es los traumas que le quedaron por parte mía. Entonces, en el 2000 hacen un proceso conmigo de sanación y todo, claro, empleándome para yo poder sostener a mis hijas. Pero en el 2017 ven mis capacidades y mi potencial para ser gestora. Entonces yo ya empecé a ir a las zonas de alto impacto, a los bares. Al pasar el tiempo me encuentro una mujer subrogada, muy mal, muy mal. Y entonces yo le decía, ¿qué le pasa? Me dijo, acabo de entregar mi bebé. Le dije, ¿a quién? Me dijo, a unos extranjeros. Pero esta mujer no, esta mujer mentalmente estaba re mal. Ella hoy en día me decía, ¿usted qué cree? Que mi hijo yo en este momento estoy pensando, ¿qué mano la cogieron? Son extranjeros. ¿Quién me va a contar si de pronto lo llevan para abusar de él? Eso era lo que ella tenía en su cabeza. Pero lo más lindo que después de que pasó todo esto que pasó con mi vida y todo, busqué el perdón de mi mamá. Mi mamá tenía 82 años en ese entonces. Y le dije, mami, yo quería decirle que yo tengo mucha rabia con usted porque usted sabe lo que pasó con mi niñez. Me dijo, gracias, Alicia, por quitarme una carga de mis hombros. ¡Wow! ¿Por qué lo lloro? Porque para mí es una felicidad saber que mi madre ya murió, pero que ella y yo nos perdonamos. Señora redactora, le agradezco darnos la voz a madres de América Latina que no tendríamos la oportunidad de llegar a estos espacios de alto nivel. Las madres de la periferia, las que están en situación de prostitución aún, en lo virtual, las madres subrogadas, son madres que no las tienen en cuenta porque nuestra historia no le importa a nadie. Y quiero terminar con un mensaje, que ninguna mujer merece vivir lo que vivimos nosotras, que es posible disfrutar de una maternidad toda la vida. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a ti, Alicia. I wish we had more time to have questions and answers and discussions. So I will pass directly to our last speaker, who will also share with us a little bit of her own country's good practices. I have the pleasure to introduce Mrs. Suraya Ahmed Pauzi, Charge d'Affaires of the Permanent Mission of Malaysia, and who will also give the concluding remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Special Rapporteur, for giving me the floor. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to our wonderful panel for sharing their insights and experiences. And on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Malaysia, allow me to begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to Ms. Rimal Salim, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, and her team for convening this side event today. We appreciate very much the work that she has done under the Council's mandate, and together all the passion and conviction that she brings with it.
Malaysia also extends our sincere thanks to the permanent mission of Algeria, Egypt, the Gambia, and all co-sponsors for their support towards this event. We are pleased to be part of this conversation, which gives attention and greater visibility to the specific experience of mothers and to the gaps that are overlooked in our laws, policies, and institutions. Today's discussions has reminded us that motherhood cannot be treated merely, as our SR put in her report, a private responsibility. It is a social function, it is an economic contribution, and above all, it is a lived reality by many of us that must be protected through a human rights lens. Today, we heard from Ms. Valerie on how employment and social security systems can either ease or deepen the burden carried by mothers. Her remarks reminded us that there's a penalty of motherhood in the labor market, but it's also a question of equality, dignity, and long-term social protection. Ms. Jainanas provided an interesting legal perspective, highlighting the painful realities faced by mothers in custody disputes and family court proceedings. Ms. Anna's intervention on migrant workers underscored all the barriers faced by these women who largely face motherhood alone. They are away from familiar support systems, often in conditions of insecurity and exclusion. I think we were all extremely moved by the testimony of Ms. Saida. Her story is a painful reminder that in situations of conflict, mothers bear unbearable loss. And amid all this unimaginable sadness and destruction, they are still the figures being expected to hold families and communities together. And of course, we appreciate Ms. Alicia's courage in sharing her experience as a mother survivor of prostitution. And I think the key takeaway that I took was that the protection systems must strive to respond with compassion and without stigma. So for Malaysia, today's discussion resonates strongly with our own national efforts to strengthen protection for women and mothers. I think like Algeria, we have amendments to our employment acts and have new extended maternity leave from 60 to 98 days. It has restricted the termination of pregnant employees and introduced flexible working arrangements. These steps support women's participation in the workforce while giving recognition to their caregiving responsibilities. We also have an Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022 that has a dedicated tribunal to provide victims with a more accessible avenue for redress, and a Domestic Violence Act, which provides protection mechanisms. So the message from today, I think, is extremely clear. If we are serious about preventing violence against women and girls, we must also be serious about addressing the shortfalls in the systems that fail mothers. I hope today's exchanges will contribute to more visible, practical, and compassionate approaches to closing the maternal gap. I thank all speakers, participants, and co-sponsors once again. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pawsey. And thank you to all of you, to all our speakers for coming today. We hope that the conversation can continue, that this is the first of many events that will mainstream mothers in your work, in your policies, foreign policies also, UN policies, and that we will continue to see a focus on that. So thank you very much.